evening to you and welcome to Politics 101, a brand new week and quite a busy week for us in Guyana. Of course, this is the week we celebrate our Republic anniversary. We are 52 years old as far as Republic is concerned. And as you know, Guyana led the English-speaking Caribbean in terms of Republican status. We ventured out there in 1970, and you know, Barbados was the most recent republic in our English-speaking Caribbean. In between them, we had Dominica, going that way, Trinidad and Tobago. And so we are celebrating 52 years of Republican status. Tomorrow, the Cooperative Republic, the founders of the Cooperative Republic, Forbes Burnham, the Prime Minister at the time. We are also celebrating his 99th birthday. I think he was born on February the 20th. And we are going to do a show on Thursday. We're going to have the Burnhamites on to talk about Forbes Burnham at 99. Certainly he was the prime minister that led the way as far as Republican status is concerned. And the person who suggested to Mr. Burnham to use cooperative as a description of our republic, E.U.C. Quayana, formerly Sidney King E.U.C. Quayana, who was a close advisor of sorts to Mr. Burnham during those times. They were very close, between 64 and 71 until they fell out. There we have Mr. Burnham on there, died prematurely in 1985, but Mr. Quayana suggested to Mr. Burnham that our republic should be named the Cooperative Republic. Mr. Burnham agreed, and the rest is history. You know, I always say that the best time for African Guyanese in our post-colonial dispensation was between 1964 and 1971, when the cultural arm of African Guyanese, or the cultural thrust, represented by Ascre and Quayana, and the political thrust represented by Mr. Burnham, worked together. We saw a lot happen during that period, and I'm working on political biography of Quayana. You know, lots have gotten into the way, so it's long in coming. Quayana was pivotal in linking Mr. Burnham and the PNC to Africa in 1964. After the PNC UF government came to power, Mr. Quayana suggested to Mr. Burnham, volunteered to go to Africa to introduce Mr. Burnham and the new government to the Africans. The Africans were not familiar with Burnham. They were more familiar with Jagan as a progressive Marxist. And Mr. Quayana visited 13 countries, introducing the People's National Congress leader, Mr. Burnham, and the PNC to the Africans. And that marked the beginning of a long relationship between the PNC/Burnham government and the Africans, with Guyana playing a major role in the African liberation movement, a major role in the anti-apartheid movement, a major role in the Group of 77. Guyana took had taken up a subscription at Tipperary Hall from the Buxtonians, and took it and handed it directly to the freedom fighters there in Africa. It was Guyana's first donation to the African freedom fighters fighting against apartheid and colonialism in those days. That was the first collection. I think it was 20-something pounds. In those days, we were still a colony, so we weren't using the dollar yet. We still were using the pound. And that period saw the coming on stream of the NIS. Guyana chaired that committee that brought on stream the NIS. That was the period, one of our guests would know that well, the rise of the GMC, the Guyana Marketing Corporation, which was quite instrumental in the evolution of the livestock industry in Black communities, selling pigs, for example. It was the time when we made our own ham and so on. And what GMC Guyana was chairman of the board. And what the GMC would do in those days is give the farmers credit to buy feed for the pigs, and then they would sell back to GMC, and that's how they paid back their debt. And it was a glorious period for the livestock industry in the Black community. I remember as a boy, not only seeing people in the villages, into the poultry and the pig industry, but I remember provision. One big bag of provision for $1. The truck would come around from GMC. And as I said, Brother UC Guyana was the chairman then. It was the time when the cooperative bank came on stream. And again, Guyana played an important role in being part of the committee that brought into being the cooperative bank. There was a land reform committee that Guyana chaired. I am giving this history. I wanted to put Guyana picture on the thing by next to the Burnham picture. I'm giving you all this history here tonight for you all to understand when there is unity of purpose at the highest level, our community did very well. When ASCREA and the PNC found common purpose between that period, I listed a whole set of national institutions that came into being. And of course, once, I don't think the operator is listening to me tonight. Of course, once Guyana and Burnham fell out, a lot of the kind of initiatives, a lot of the steam went out of the African Guyanese community. I want to put Burnham picture up at the same time. They fell out and the rest was history. We have to know our history because often we have a sense of history in the wrong side. A lot of people know about Burnham's role, quite understandably, because he was the prime minister. But you all must know that leaders don't do it alone, because often we believe so. But you have to have unity of purpose among the various sections of a diverse community. Our African Guyanese community is a very diverse community. We are all Black, we're all Guyanese, but we have ideological diversity. Not all of us have the same ideological outlook. We even have cultural. Within the culture, we have subcultures. I born and grow in a part of the country, Buxton and Annandale. And on the Annandale, people would tell you, what is a Congo? Tracing their ancestry back to the Congos. They would beat drum with sticks. And in Buxton, we beat the drum with our hands. So even within the culture, there is diversity in the culture. And sometimes what we do is we authorize our own people because they don't fit into what we think is the mainstream. But that relationship between Guyana and Burnham produced, and I listed a number of institutions there. You know, Mr. Burnham, Mr. Guyana was invited to become Guyana's first ambassador to the United Nations. He turned it down. He told Mr. Burnham he's not a diplomat. His place is at home. Mr. Guyana was invited to go back into the cabinet, to go into the cabinet. He said, no, his place is not in the cabinet. But to work for his people outside of cabinet, everybody can be in cabinet. Guyana is still alive. He would be 97 years old in 2 months. As I said, Burnham is 99 today. We must know our legends because our strength as a people is when we bring all our legends together. We lost recently a musical icon, Professor Long. She wasn't a politician, but she contributed immensely to the culture of our country. And we must know our icons. She came from a musical family. She came from a family that was steeped in blackness and the Garveyite tradition. And she herself was a chairman of the Pan-African movement. We must know these things. Do we know that the person who wrote the party song for the PPP, for the PNC, and for the WPA is UC Guyana? Do we know that? When those 3 parties are singing their song, the words of Guyana. I'm saying these things to say that this is Black history, and we have to know ourselves, all of ourselves. All of ourselves, that we have contributed immensely to Guyana. We don't have only 1 or 2 heroes and heroines. We got plenty in the political sphere, in the cultural sphere. Sometimes we sell ourselves short because we only remember part of our contribution. And we authorize others. There is a time and a season for everything. Our leaders, sometimes they quarrel with each other. They break up with each other. But that does not mean that we should not be able to put the puzzles together. Do we know that there is a book that Black scholars are reading now in classes, with using it to teach? They came before Columbus, Ivan van Sertima, a Guyanese, who broke the way we thought about history. You always thought that African people came here across the Middle Passage. They weren't here before. One of our guests tonight, Eric Phillips, has done tremendous research on the fact that Black people were in the Americas before slavery. There is Ivan van Sertima, great Guyanese. They came before Columbus. He said Black people were here before Columbus. Ivan van Sertima. And that book is a heartbreaking book. They were skeptical when he first wrote it, but it's now accepted as mainstream history. And Walter Rodney, 50 years ago, published another heartbreaking book. Yes, that's his picture over my shoulder there, getting me story wrong. There. Oh, God, there. Walter Rodney's book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Heartbreaking book. You do not study development in the third world, development in Africa, without that book. That book is now read all over the world, in which Rodney argued that there was a time when Africa was far more developed than other continents in the world, and that it was European greed, European quest for accumulation of wealth that led to the underdevelopment of Africa. And he traced European development with African underdevelopment. And he made the case that you do not remove 80 million and more people from a continent and expect that continent to develop. So many Guyanese who have made their mark. Ras T. Makonnen is a name, and I want you all to write these names down on a piece of paper, as the mighty Zandoli would say. You know, he sing the calypso about his wife only bringing man family home. She never bring home a family. And he said, you know, put all your family, the name down on a piece of paper for me. I want you all to put these names down on a piece of paper. Good night, Brenda. Good night, Brenda. I see you. I had a conversation with you yesterday, and you know, and thanks very much for your contribution. Thanks very much. Ras T. Makonnen was the man that financed the early Pan-African movement. He was a Guyanese. He died in Kenya. He was a Buxtonian. Family from Buxton Front, Friendship Front. He owned a restaurant in Manchester, England. And the money from that restaurant, he financed the Pan-African conferences, from the first one in 1900 to the one in 1945 in Manchester. That first Pan-African conference organized by Sylvester Williams, a barrister from Trinidad and Tobago, a lawyer. In those days, they called him barrister at law. And Ras T. Makonnen was part of that crowd. And he was the money man, the treasurer. He eventually migrated to Africa and died in Kenya in the 1980s. A Guyanese, a Buxtonian. Ras T. Makonnen, Makonnen. Giving you all some Guyanese so that you all understand that you all come from royalty, African royalty. You all come from people who gave knowledge to the world. Sometimes you all fight with these little people in Guyana. They're little people, minute. And you all fight with them. And you ought not to be fighting with them because they're not in your class. You all gave not just to Guyana, but you all gave to the world. When you see black girls and black boys, black women and black men with their PhDs and so on, you almost claim it because they could not get those PhDs and law degrees and all without your contribution. George James, not a historian, know these names. Because they say when we come in the evening, we come in to talk about how Jack Dio this and Jack Dio that and so on. I want you all and want them because I know they're watching. That wherever we go, we teach. Whatever we do, we teach. Teaching, disseminating information is in with DNA. We teach the world wherever we go, whatever we do. We're teachers, disseminators of knowledge. Don't sell yourself small. You are big people with big history and big contribution to the world. And I'm just talking about Guyana, I ain't talking about the Caribbean yet. I ain't talking yet about Eric Williams' Capitalism and Slavery, which is still the most authoritative treatise, economic treatise about slavery, capitalism and slavery, in which Eric Williams is arguing that slavery is a derivative of capitalism. I always listen when black people say, I'm a capitalist. What kind of capitalist you are? Capitalism is what enslaved you, and capitalism can liberate you. As soon as you get a little money in the bank, you call yourself a little capitalist. You got money. Money is not necessarily wealth. Tonight I'm going to be talking to my boys, Eric and Simpson Da Silva, about wealth. But that's what we want. People make wealth off of we. Dr. Eric Williams, bad man. Went back to Trinidad in 1956 and went to Woodford Square and created the University of Woodford Square. He was campaigning to become the premier, but he was teaching. We're teachers, for God's sake, always. And I'm saying that when you all invest in us, we got to lift you all up. We make mistakes, we get knocked down, we get kicked down, we fight one another. But some of us are still alive to tell the tale. And so it's Black History Month. It's our Republic anniversary, the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. It's Burnham's birthday. And whatever you think about Burnham, he made a hell of a contribution to Guyana. And take it from me as somebody who grew up fighting him politically. Because our young generation believed that those leaders were not going as fast as they should in delinking our communities, our societies from colonialism. And what we had is what Professor Gordon Rollaire, who is the premier expert on Calypso and society, the premier scholar on Calypso in the Caribbean, is a man named Gordon Rollaire, a Guyanese who now lives in Trinidad, having taught at the UWI. And Rollaire described that period of the 1960s and 70s as a fight between the fathers and the sons, you know? Burnham was education minister when he made it possible for people like Walter Rodney and Gordon Rollaire and that generation to get Guyana scholarship to go away and study. Prior to that, it was only red-skinned, middle-class sons and daughters of the plantocracy and the high-skinned people could get scholarship. And when the first government came into power, Burnham was the education minister, opening up the education system for poor black people and brown people. And Walter Rodney and Rupert Roop-Narain and all that generation, and Dye and all of them, they got scholarships to go away and study. Ironically, they were to come back and become very much part of the WPA, which was in conflict with the PNC in those days. Gordon Rollaire said it was the fathers and the sons and daughters. Having a struggle over what the content of independence should be. You know, the Black Power people felt that Burnham and them weren't going far enough with blackness. This is Jagan and Burnham boarding the plane in 1953 after the suspension of the Constitution. They went to England and they went to India together. Know your history and know the contribution to it. And so long as you all got to deal with me on this program, I'm always going to inject some history and some knowledge. I know you all like the red meat. Somebody else said Professor Gordon Rollaire is one of our best historians, of course, sister. Joyanne was in Guyana and we were on a demonstration. I think it was in Buxton, and she spotted me and she came out of the car, man, and hung up on things, you know? And it's always good to feel the flesh. It's always good to link up. So, after my long introduction, let me introduce my peeps who are going to give you all the real deal tonight. Simpson Da Silva, former agriculture minister, one of the youngest agriculture minister. The Bible still in his 20s when I made him agriculture minister. Investment in the youth. And the man is still in agriculture today at all levels. He's an activist. He plants, he processes, you name it. When we went to school, we used to call agriculture what? Agricultural science. Remember? Agri-science. One of my teachers at school, Mr. Ward, we gave him the name Agri-science. You know, he always, Simpson might know him. One of the old timers, Mr. Ward, I forget his last name, but you know, he made us understand agriculture. He said agriculture is a religion. And we gave him the name Agri-Sci. So agriculture is a science. It's a science. And Simpson's a walking example of that. And my next guest is no stranger to you all, Eric Phillips. He was on here 2 weeks ago. And you all said is one of the most informative programs, if not most informative politics 101, which is why I say whatever we do, we teach. Eric is back. Eric is just a walking, you know, they used to talk about them big men as walking dictionaries. Right? Eric is an all-rounder. You name it, you know. White House fellow he was. And he had, like me, study political science. He studied the real science engineering. He's an engineer. I mean, you were a Batman, he's an engineer when I was a little boy. You look up, because always tell us that people not into science, you know. But Eric and them and Simpson and them agricultural science. Gentlemen, my brothers, welcome.
Thank you, David. Good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Dave.
I stole a lot of your time, but I hope you all forgive me. In doing my sermon, we're not just only teachers, but we're also preachers, no matter what we do. All right? We're teachers and preachers, you know, whatever we do. Brothers, it's 52 years of um, our Republican status. Like me, you all grew up with independence and republic. Start by reflecting on what republicanism and independence has meant, should mean in 2020. I start with you, Eric.
Thank you, David. Before I do that, I'd like to congratulate you on history that you just went through. We need to recognize that culture and economics are one and the same. If you don't have an economic philosophy in your culture, you will perish. Burnham, of course, tried to use corporatism, and that's economic, a cultural form of dealing with your economic approach, because we have three ways: private sector, public sector, cooperatives. We've been locked out of the private sector. The public sector is controlled by the government, and corps, really, that's the only path we have as African Guyanese to move forward. And I think in becoming a republic, Burnham, and a cooperative republic, Burnham was actually trying to give us an economic philosophy that would have done us well. And I think that message has been lost. Our villages are corps. That's the generational wealth that we have. The economy is now changing. We've been left out from the private sector economy with oil because we don't have generational wealth, we don't have assets, we don't have technology, we don't have networks. But we still have to pursue the part of corporatism and cooperatives, because that's where our land can be turned into wealth. Um, Even the oil we have is really not in the ocean, it's on land beneath the water in the ocean. So we have to reorient ourselves and we have to understand who we are if we're going to do well. Burnham tried to instill that in us. We are a great people. So this Black History Month, for example, I've been writing about the entrepreneurial DNA that's in us. That whilst we enslaved, what we did to build Guyana, moved 100 million tons of earth, cleared 9 million acres, lost 473,000 lives. And then after emancipation, we bought villages. We bought plantations, which we turned into villages. And those villages had principles like family, working together, corps, land as a means of generational wealth, etc. So I'm glad you brought that history in, because we've been told by Eric Williams, we've been told by Van Sortimer who we are and what has happened to us. And so we need to learn these lessons. And that's the sad thing about us in Guyana. We have not learned our lessons so that we can put a path together. If we had learned our lessons, we would understand that unity is how we pursue it. We should know that the 7 principles of Kwanzaa would give us spiritual, emotional, and economic wealth. But we're not looking at that. And our leaders are so busy fighting that they don't understand that economic power gives you sustainable political power. Political power comes and goes, but the economic power is always there, and that's what others have. Look, there are less than 4,000 Portuguese in this country. They control 15% of the GDP. And yet we are, when you have include mixed, we are about 60% of the population. We own less than 5% of wealth. And if you were to look forward with oil and gas and where the economy is taking us, agriculture, food, infrastructure, a new city, tourism, where are we located? We need to understand who we are, what we have done, and that we're capable of doing anything because we were the first scientists, engineers, doctors, lawyers, economists, teachers. So I'm glad you started with that, because we have to be centered on who we are in order to move forward. And that center is our culture. And our culture is a culture of corporatism, not capitalism, because as you rightly said, that's what destroyed not only us, but Africa. Greed. And this type of capitalism where a few people become wealthy, and that's embedded in Guyana. So we have to look at corps. I'll come to that later because I've been doing a lot of things, and just so that people could understand where we are, where I am in terms of Black economic and African Guyanese development. I was a co-author of the Guyana 21 plan. People forget that. We launched that in July 1996. I was a co-author of the Guyana 2030 plan. I wrote a Linden 10-10 plan, which is Linden 10 years from now, 10% growth rate, in Region 10. I wrote Village Entrepreneurship for Sustainable Development for our youth. All these documents I've written and have shared with governments, and they've done nothing. So what I'm doing right now over the last year, I've been writing, after deep thinking and talking to others, an African Guyanese development plan, because neither political party will write it. And I don't blame them. If we are a community, we have to write our own path. We have to create our own development strategy based on our assets, based on our strengths. Understand what those are. Those are land, those are human resources. Our weaknesses are lack of capital. But I'll delve into that after, because you asked me to comment on what independence is, which was a second emancipation, and what republicanism is, which was a third emancipation. The third emancipation, which was republicanism, should have allowed us to become economically viable. Instead, that hasn't happened.
Eric Phillips there, laying it out as he always does. Eric, you were on a couple of weeks ago, and in the interim, what have you been doing? I know you're always busy. You're always hooked up with not only the national, but the regional and the international. What have you been doing in the interim?
We've been looking at how to get the kings and queens here so that we can ground our people back in our history. And
you mean the African kings and queens?
Yes, we're looking to bring 50 of them here. There are 745 kingdoms, and they actually control the wealth of Africa. And it was their wealth that was taken away by the British in Mozambique and Zimbabwe and all those places, the gold, the diamond, the human resources. And that's how when they had the Berlin meeting, that's how they destroyed Africa, by splitting it around. So I've been doing a lot of that.
I'm in a teaching mood this evening. Hold your thought there. The Berlin meeting, please tell our audience that was the meeting in which they sit down and carve up Africa.
1884.
Yes, tell our people about that.
23 countries. So you saw Belgium, they got a Congo, and what King Leopold did, he killed 10 million people, chopped off hundreds and thousands of hands because they weren't giving him the allotment he wanted. So we need to understand the trials and tribulations we've been through. So I've been looking at that, and I'm writing as we speak, and I'll share with you later what we need to do, because there are many opportunities there. And the issue is, how do we approach those opportunities?
On that conference, of course, 1884, the mad scramble for Africa. They sat down there and chop up Africa and give to the European countries. And of course, the response to that was that big conference in 1900 organized by Sylvester Williams, the first Pan-African conference. W.B. Du Bois attended and may have
Makonnen. I'm glad you raised the name Makonnen, because people don't know him. You're right, he funded it.
Yes.
And was Guyanese.
And he's right from Buxton. Yeah, people them is Buxton from. They used to they had a lot of donkeys when I was growing up, right? I'm trying to remember the last name. I think Brother Simpson is back.
Maybe having some.
Yeah, we seem to be having some difficulty. Eric, you attended a conference. I attended
a conference in Evanston, Illinois, where for the first time, reparations was granted to local people. So from a local perspective. And they showed the redlining. So if you go to Evanston and you cross the train line, the value of the houses on one side is like 1/5 the value on the other side. It's happened all over the United States. In Boston, the average wealth of a white family is $247,000. The average wealth of a black family is $8. And a lot of that has to do with redlining and affirmative action to whites. So they were able to, through a young black lady, Robin Rue Simmons, she was a counselor, they were able to pass an act locally. And they put aside $10 million initially, and they're actually giving that to people in the community to improve their homes, to buy new housing, and also to raise the valuation of the community. And that was a great lesson because we will have to look at that in Guyana too, given the state we're in. But I met Danny Glover there, and he's willing to come here to speak on reparations. It was done by the Institute of Black World, the North American African American Reparations Committee, and then COBRA. And these are people fighting with HR 40, which, as you know, is soon, hopefully, we'll get the final congressman, and there'll be a Reparatory Justice Act in the United States.
Beautiful. And I think in California, there's some initiatives there.
In California, there's over $100 million in the pot. They don't know what to do with it because it has to be some legislation. And a Jamaican lady by the name of Enid Williams, who I know very well, she's trying to help them. She is a banker, a private sector person, and she's trying to figure out how to leverage that $100 million into $1 billion in the community. But there's a sense now of the injustice. COVID showed us the true injustices, health, and all the other indices you can look in terms of wealth, because wealth is not just capital, it's your health, it's your education, it's where you live, and those indices she is looking at.
Yes, Rusty McConnell was born in Buxton. His birth name was George Thomas. George Thomas, born there in Buxton, George Thomas Griffith. The Griffith at Buxton front for you, Buxtonians in the audience. Remember those people used to, they had a lot of donkeys near to walk about them. When you go across, when you go up to Buxton front, Buxton Secondary School, over the next side, the eastern side, going up to the ball field, the Griffith, that's where Rusty McConnell was born and became a well-known Pan-Africanist. Simpson Da Silva, we've been holding the fort while.
Yes,
your opening remarks on
thank you very much.
On independence and republicanism and Burnham and Guyana and that generation that led the way after independence.
Thank you very much, Eric. Not Eric, Dr. Heinz. I am of that era, a very young boy, and was looking, studying, and learning from the work of our elders. And I am a product of Burnham's free education from nursery to tertiary. I don't recall paying a cent, and I remember while I was at Guyana School of Agriculture, I received a salary because at the time, Burnham said as long as you're going on to a tertiary education and you're working, you'd be able to get your salary. While we were in Cuba, we also got paid by the Guyana government and the Cuban government. And there are many of us, ordinary people, who in the 60s, early 70s, would never have dreamed of being able to go to college. But because of the policies of Burnham, we were all afforded that opportunity. What I would like to deal with, David, is a lot of the things about what I call the inclusion of African Guyanese in the development of Guyana. If you were to look around, you would see that the things we used to do back in the days, good things that you have spoken about that I don't want to repeat, we need to try and have a restoration, a rebirth, a renaissance of some simple things we used to do that we are currently taking them for granted. We as leaders have to step up and go into the communities, educate our people through.
We seem to be having some difficulty there with the connection.
And we take massive
We seem to be having some difficulty there, Eric.
Yeah, the bandwidth. Yeah.
Yes, the bandwidth is giving us some hell there. Um, Eric, we're into the era of oil, whether we like it or not. With taking into consideration all the controversy over the signing bonus, over the contract, over the giveaway of the thing, when all of that is said and done, the fact of the matter is that we are into a new dispensation.
Absolutely. And
And
David, people don't realize that had we not had oil, we would have punished dramatically during COVID.
that's there you go.
And even though we're only getting 14 and a half cents out of the dollar, and Saudi Arabia is getting almost 70 cents, we're the fastest growing economy in the world. We have been doing that for the last 3 years. The issue is, how does our community participate in it? And that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's where leadership has to come into play. And we have to be very systematic. There are opportunities in oil and gas, local content. How do we become part of that? Do we need affirmative procurement, as some have been suggesting, because we don't have the technology, the capital, the networks, the partners, all of that. We don't own the bank. So should there be affirmative procurement? And this is where I'm frustrated with the opposition. They should be at the table, not disunited as they are, negotiating for things like affirmative procurement. That should have been part of the local content. So we have local content. We have tremendous diversification going on in agriculture. If you look in the budget, there are billions of dollars in the budget for agriculture. The government has already built 63 fish farms and shrimp. The government is doing coconut nurseries. These are things that we could participate in. So there's a lot of food that can be grown. We go over 200 fruits and vegetables. We have fertile soil, etc. Infrastructure. There are a lot of infrastructure projects going on. How do we participate in that? The government is speaking about Silica City, a new capital, because believe everyone what the science is saying, by 2030, the whole coast may be underwater. And I've seen progressive maps of that, and it's indeed true. And so it worries me about our villages, because our villages are really exposed. And that's why we're pushing for reparations for land, because we need to have land as a basis of generational wealth, and our villages are at risk. We have a gentleman named Edmund Braithwaite, who's African Guyanese, who's coming back after 40 years. He's trying to build a Hilton. How should other African Guyanese participate in that, so that we have the 51% ownership? Because that industry is booming. Government procurement. The budget is 550 something billion, the largest ever, 40% more than last year. Where are the pockets of opportunity for our folks, given the assets we have? If you look in the budget, you could see many areas, if we were unified or if we had a business strategy, we could pursue. Youth development, a lot of money in there for youth development, youth entrepreneurship. How do we participate in that? Capital, how do we accumulate capital? We have Ghanaians here. I'm meeting one tomorrow. We have Jamaicans here. We have Trinidadians here. We have people in the diaspora here. How do we accumulate capital? How do we do joint ventures with them? But more critically, David, as we plan for the future in oil and gas, are we preparing our young people? Do we know how many engineers we need? Chemical engineers, civil engineers, mechanical engineers. How many people doing law, commercial law, law of the sea? Are we in our community preparing our young people to succeed? IT. There's a new group just got a license there to be the third operator. Bandwidth is going to be critical in this post-COVID environment. How do we get licenses? We've been studying 13 sectors of this economy, and we have defined the gaps. We've defined who owns those sectors. And during the last government, we gave them documents saying that you need to do this. For example, there might be one here about a bank. We needed an African Guyanese bank. We needed resuscitation of village communities using that bank. We needed a way to access and develop capital. We needed our young people to own bank accounts. So we had comprehensive plans given to the last government, over 80 pages, showing what we need to do as African Guyanese to make sure that we're not left behind. I'm very concerned about the current generational gap, which means we can't participate in the high-tech areas of oil, and that may continue into the future if our educational system, if our families, if our parents don't recognize what the future is. The future is about oil and gas. It's about gas to shore. It's about solar energy. It's about electric cars. Where are we? How are we preparing our kids for that? And it has to be a community effort. We have to build our capital through corps. I'm part of a corp with Cosper Roberts and a bunch of people in the diaspora. We meet every Friday night. 2,000 acres of land. What do you do with that? We need to stop not talking to each other. We need economies of scale. Some villages should be growing only coconut. Some should be growing moringa. Some should be growing X, Y, and Z, because those are where the market's at. We're not planning properly. We're still planning for a local Guyanese market where the global food market is humongous. And so we need to look at that collectively. How do we use solar energy to minimize the cost of production? How do we package? How do we brand? Oh, those are all things that we need to be looking at, because those are critical. If not, we're going to fall further behind. But the opposition needs to come to the table with a plan, and they should have done that before the budget was developed, to say, these are my concerns, these are my constituencies, these are the things we need, let us discuss it in the budget. And then you go to Parliament and you discuss the merits. The opposition should have put together their own budget and used that to debate the budget in Parliament instead of coursing down, which is stupid and banal and non-productive and leaves us not at the table where everything is being carved up. Look at the last oil and gas conference. We were absent. I mean, we went there, some of the politicians, but it's not the politicians. We need our technical people. We have a lot of tremendous talent in the diaspora and in Guyana, but it's not being utilized. We keep putting politicians to do jobs that business people should be doing. And that is one of the issues in terms of our sustainable development. Get the right people, let them develop the plans, give them concessions like this government is giving to its people. Look, there's a huge demand for sand and rock. Are we getting any quarries? Are we getting any sand concessions? Those are business opportunities. Silica City, it's 53.1 square kilometers. That's a huge area. Houses are going to be built. It's going to be a green, resilient, eco-friendly city. Are we preparing our young people or even our current people involved in construction for those opportunities? And are we at the table making sure that we have an equal bite? So there are many things that we need to deal with if we're going to develop our economy and if we're not going to be left out of the economy. Because right now, we're not even at the table to get the scraps.
Not to the table to get the scraps. Simpson, you're back?
Yes, I'm back. I'm sorry, but I'm using my phone now.
All right, pick up from where you left off.
Yeah, I would pick up by linking with Eric, because Eric has been doing an excellent job. He's 100% correct in that we are not at the table discussing our inclusion in the sustainable development. Are you hearing me? I'm just checking.
Yes,
it seems as though oh, good. Very good. We must be part of the conversation. And by being part of the conversation, we must take action to solve the problems. My thing to us is that the opposition, all our African Guyanese groups, must be speaking loud and clear right now about sustainable development of African Guyanese. We must link whatever we do with the sustainable development goals. We must link to the 2030 agenda, because there's a lot of money available worldwide for us. We can, as we have spoken earlier about the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, we can be the world model for cooperative development of African Guyanese. Because when we do the study, we do not see organizations and groups like that doing what should be done. So we should seize the opportunity now to brand ourselves as a world model, work together. You have spoken about unity with purpose. Let us do that now. Let us call on all organizations to use the contradictions, use the negative and positive energy for the good of us all. Let us really engage the grassroots people. And then when we have just had a conference, the oil and gas conference, and we met with some of the brothers and sisters from Ghana. And for the first time, personally, I was so touched in spirit, body, and mind to work very closely with the people from West Africa. When we met with the Ghanaians, the guys who are in charge of the petroleum companies there, the government agency, private sector, they all look like us. And they said to us, brothers and sisters, we want to work with you now to make you prosperous, your family prosperous, and the entire African Guyanese prosperous. It's an opportunity that we must seize. We must seize this opportunity by the open, the return policy. You know, we used to have way back when they brought us all to this part of the world, the gate or the door of no return. Now, the Ghana is open, and many other West African countries are returned to work with us. There's so many technologies available, virtually and otherwise, that we can work with our brothers and sisters. The doors are open. Let us twin our villages and let our villages now adopt a lot of the technologies that we are missing. Fortunately, Ghana has their arms open to teach us, to show us, to work with us, to invest their money in Ghana in all the various sectors. It is just for us to come together, work together, put our differences aside, and try to embrace brothers. I must say to you, after some of the brothers left here from the oil and gas conference, on a daily basis we were speaking. They're very eager to work with us, and we must seek that opportunity. And at home here in Ghana, we have to take the government to task. Let them do what they're saying. If you listen to the government, there's a good talk. I love the talk. But at the same time, we must hold them accountable. We must be mobilized. We must be prepared. We must be organized to benefit from what is going on. A good example is the crisis we just had, which was a flood crisis caused by the climate crisis and brought on an economic crisis in this health crisis. We have to respond appropriately. We have to recover in a very strong way because the discrimination factors are alive and well. But we have to go to the system, get our people to be organized, and hold the government accountable. For example, in Region 6, Region 2, Region 3, I would say, because I was responsible for Region 6, about 90% of the people who were affected, and we dealt with at least 4,000 in Region 6, and about 80 to 90% are still to receive flood relief. So we must be able to go to the government again and say to them, that is not right, that is not just, it's against justice, it is against human rights, because we have a right to eat, we have a right to food, we have a right to fair and equitable employment, we have a right to do business. And the money that is available to the people of this country belongs to all the people, including people of African Guyanese. So I say to us, brothers and sisters, and people in the diaspora, let us reconnect. Let us reconnect, re-engage to restore the villages. The people are there hungry, anxious, to be part of this movement. The oil and gas economy is bringing a lot of wealth, but it is just fair that we must get slices. We must push for affirmative action. We must put for public activities of those kind that can benefit us. Because as we go in our villages and communities, we are seeing clearly that we are left out, we left behind. So, Dr. Hines, I wish that we have these kinds of conversation going not only at this level, but at all the organizational levels, starting immediately. The time for action is now. We must be integrally participating in the oil and gas economy where the local content is concerned. We must get back into feeding ourselves. We must produce enough from our kitchen gardens, our family farms, our medium farms, and large scale farms, because agriculture is our culture. It is in our vein, it's in our DNA. We must have value to all the products. We must teach the people to do so immediately. And the extra that we have, we export to brothers and sisters in the diaspora, export to Africa. Africa is ready for us. Ghana is ready for us. We must link to Brazil. Brazil has millions of people there who are of African,
Descent. The largest African population outside of Africa, 80 million people and more, black people and more in Brazil. Simpson, Valiata is saying here, Dr. Hines, we need these two men in a serious meeting in one of the villages with the coalition members in a serious dark period. And she's making an important point. Well, Eric is a man in the village. You are always in the villages. And whenever I have gone in villages, Simpson, and we talk agriculture, I would introduce you to those villages, because I think that's where the conversation needs to happen. I see Akani Blair is here. He's a little wayward boy that helped raise politically, and he gets wayward now. His father was what we call the original entrepreneur in Buxton, Ulrich Blair Sherman. And we become an entrepreneur. We carry himself like an entrepreneur. He is very seriously. And I raised this guy politically, but he gets wayward. And why you come back home, Akani, and stop using people for the PPP and come back home to the tell us what you have been, because we talk about what needs to be done. We talk about the latent opportunities. Tell us what you have been doing in your organization in linking the communities and teasing out how we are going to take advantage of these possibilities.
Thanks, David. There are two things we're doing. One, as the Ghana Reparations Committee, and secondly, a small group. I agree with everything that Simpson has said, but if you don't have a plan, you will fail. If you fail to plan, you will fail. And that is what we haven't been doing. So over the last 3 years, we've been meeting groups of young people in different villages. We went to Essequibo, we went to New Amsterdam, Berbice. We had one in the villages here on the East Coast, talking to young people about opportunities, finding out what it is that they need, and also trying to assist them. So we're working with the young people. But I think the more important thing that we're doing is that we have to put together a national development plan for African Guyanese that is in sync with the development plan of Guyana. Whether that development plan is oil-based, agricultural-based, whether it's diversification, etc. And that's what I've been spending most of my time on. We need to do a PESTEL. We need to do a SWOT analysis. We need to understand our strengths, our weaknesses, the opportunities, the threats. We're analyzing that. We've gone back to 1621 to see what has happened to us until today. We've noticed all the other groups, how they've been formed. We don't like to talk about that, but we're documenting it. A simple thing like oil wealth. 7 oil blocks went to Guyanese, none to African Guyanese, 6 to Indians, 1 to a Portuguese. That is generational wealth. We look at all the licenses. We look at all the concessions now for quarries, now that sand and rock and all of that is important. And so we're documenting that, but we're also saying that for our villages, we need to know what we need to grow. We can't just grow and then sell the excess. We're the markets. It's not about what you grow. It's about the markets. It's the market in Ghana, and there are markets in Ghana. There are a lot of rice requirements all over the continent. So we need to define what it is that we need to be growing and how we grow it. Does one village, as I said, do only one crop? Right? Where do we get the capital? Are we going to use solar energy to make it sustainable? We could put 2 megawatts of solar power behind 3 villages, and then they could value add. Instead of just growing crops, they can package, we can do all sorts of things. So that's what we were doing. But we also need to look at our youth. Our youth don't even know who they are. So we have to ground them. They're all involved in IT to a certain extent, but we need to provide them with a framework so that they can make money. We look at the budget. As I said, there are about 8 areas of the budget that we can tap into. But we need to have a plan when we go to the government to say, hey, we need this. Look, there are 63 fish farms already done, all in Indian villages. Who on our side has gone to the government or the Minister of Agriculture, who seems to be a very open person, to say, we have land here. We would like to grow coconuts because you have 3 nurseries. We would like 20 fishing pots. So we need to do that. But we need to raise capital. How do we engage the diaspora? How do we build wealth through shares? Because not everyone will come back, but we need capital, because you can't be a capitalist without capital. How do we ground our corps? What relationships do we have with the food import bill in the Caribbean? There's $6 billion of import food. What is Barbados importing? What's Jamaica importing? What's Antigua importing? Can we take 10,000 acres of our land and dedicate that to Barbados in a joint venture with Barbadians to grow the food they want? So they forward invest. So we know that the crops that we grow are bought. So there are many things we need to do. And again, for oil, which is going to be the foundation of this economy, do we have the engineers? Do we have the environmentalists? Do we have all these things? Are we nurturing those in our young people? Because those who have the brains are going to be the ones who are going to succeed. Look, the First Lady just did 100 scholarships to Amerindian people. I monitor everything. Why don't we have that for us? We need to define where our kids need to be in this economy in 5 years, in 10 years. We need to understand that Agricola stands surrounded by an incredible increase in value in land and property, but Agricola is not valued. Everything around Agricola is about $100 million an acre. Agricola is about $20 an acre, if that much. Why? They'll soon get squeezed out by some other mechanism. A road is passing behind them. Where are the roads going? There's a road going from Vredenhoek to Parika to Bartica. What are we doing along those lands? At the lands along there, do we own those lands? Are we asking for lands? So there are a lot of things we need to do. We need to bring our best people together and develop a plan and let the politicians stay in the corner. We present it to them because we're not about the politics. We're about economics, even though they're linked. And that's the dilemma we have. The politicians don't understand economics. They haven't run a cake shop. And that's why they don't do anything for us when they're in power. Put the right people in the right place, let them develop the plans, and then you create the enabling environment for all to succeed, everybody in Guyana. The PPP is doing what it's doing for its constituency. I don't blame them. They have a plan. Somebody created a plan for them. Where is our plan? The Amerindians have a plan. They have a Tashaus Council with 213 leaders. They have 100 scholarships. They have $1.3 billion for roads. They have 2,000 CSOs they're hiring. Where is our plan? Where is our 10-point plan? Granger developed a 10-point plan for Amerindians. A month later, I gave him a 10-point plan for Africans. Nothing happened. I mean, Jordan tried to help. We need a banking license. Now we need a market bank license. There are all sorts of opportunities here But we need to look at the budget, we need to look at where the country is going, and then we need to plan. We can't just ad hoc say we can get in nothing. You get nothing because you don't know what you want.
That's right.
The budget wasn't built around you. You need to help build the budget. And so the whole issue from an environmental risk assessment, from a pestle analysis, is the governance. We need a government of national unity. How do we bring that forward so that the planning process includes us? Each village should have a planning process. And then we bring it together and link it together so that we can see where there's synergies. We can see where the markets are. Then we can say to our Canadian brothers, hey, we need 20 million in a joint venture with you. We'll put in the land. The land has this value. Here's the market. We can do that. We have people to do those skills. It's just that we are not united, and just that we are too busy cussing out people and not at the table planning, and we ignoring our youth. Look, we got some stupidness called what something and skinny and nasty. Some show this weekend. That's where we spend our money in a COVID environment. And the bank don't give them money so they can borrow money to buy tickets. Where's our value system? And that comes from the community. That comes from our leadership. And the leadership right now is a political leadership. And instead of them sending messages that would help to improve our community, they're fighting among themselves. And instead of them being at the table, talking to President Ali and Vice President Jagdeo and saying, hey, how do we best develop Guyana? Because right now we're fighting and the foreigners eating our lunch. And that's what they want. We need to come together. And of course, the USAID has identified that. But our political leaders are not linked to economic leaders. And that is a dilemma.
Eric, isn't it interesting? The USAID is saying power sharing is what we need. They're saying cash transfers are important. In effect, our agenda, which was pushed aside by our own government when they were in power. Now the white people are saying that is the solution for Guyana. And I keep saying that
they've been cash transfers. The Gaisuko got 250,000, even though they had gotten remittance, gotten their termination things.
There you
go. We had the floods; those were cash transfers.
Yes,
but the cash transfers aren't targeted in the right way.
That's right.
I mean, say for example, we wanted to grow agriculture in a village. We have a cash transfer every month, of which 40% must be for food. And the food must be bought from people in our villages.
That's right.
You're stimulating growth. You're stimulating entrepreneurship. You're stimulating wealth. There's so many ways of interlinking these things instead of delinking them from the reality of an integrated economy. And that's because the political leaders aren't talking and the economic leaders are absent from the table.
Simpson, are you there? Is Simpson with us?
I think only in audio. I'm not certain what's going on.
Yeah. His camera is off. Simpson, you hearing us?
He's using his phone, so it might be.
Yeah. That's, the bandwidth problem there in Guyana is quite a thing. Eric Phillips, tell us about that. Expand on that agricultural thing that you mentioned in passing.
Well, let me share with you what we did 2 years ago. We wrote a proposal to the government saying that we will go into Agricola and then Amstel, and over a year create a cadre of young people who will be trained in business and entrepreneurship, and then we will work on a project with them to get sustainable wealth. So it was courses, it was exposure, it was bringing in business people to tell them about how to grow their business. It was linking with the businesses that are in their community, which is, the flour company and the oil company. And then we asked the government, and I don't want to get into these details, to do a deal with the Veras, who own 1,000 acres nearby, where the village of Agricola would grow by 30 acres and would then expand towards where the new highway is being built. This way, Agricola, which has 117 house lots, would have had agricultural lands, and then the young people would have been trained to create products that, of which IAST, the Institute of Applied Science and Technology, would have worked with them to standardize it, to test it, to make sure it has shelf life, and then we would export. We did that. The government asked us to do that. Well, Amna Ali asked me to do that. I went in, created a plan, took the people in, and it cost 12 million Guyana dollars to do it for the year. When I took the budget to them, they said they had no money. So I used my money and money I borrowed from other people to do that program. And then, of course, the elections came and Agricola was abandoned. Now, we have a model where we can resuscitate all of our villages through youth entrepreneurship and community leadership, because the program was about entrepreneurship, it's about knowing yourself, and it's about leadership. Those are the three components you need to bring together for village resuscitation. The Denamsel people had a different scenario. I never got to them. But that model could work in all of our villages. And each village, Agricola would have developed a village development plan. There are about 9 young people in Agricola who were doing fruit juices. We got IAST to come in and say to them, we will test your juices. We will make sure there's consistency. We'll make sure you package it right. We'll make sure you bottle it right. All of that. But it was never supported. And we have hundreds of thousands of acres of land in Berbice. It needs to be drained. And there are products that can be grown there that can be exported. And so we have assets, but we're not maximizing them because we are not training our young people that agriculture is valuable.
Eric, how can the diaspora, and I see Simpson is back, Eric, quickly, how can the diaspora, in a really meaningful way, now, I hear Simpson, and I hear what both of you are saying. Y'all are saying we have to help ourselves. There's a limit to which we can help ourselves. We need the government, which of course is the distributor of the wealth. You know, we need our political representatives who are the ones who are closer to the table.
And the budget.
Yes, and the budget. That we need to fight because we are not going to be handed anything. And we have a moral case. We have a historical case. We have a righteous case. But we are in a situation where we are competing with 2 other ethnic groups, right? And we have to find a way for all of us to live together in Ghana. But at the moment, it's competition. How can the diaspora help to build up our initial resources? Because what I hear you guys are saying is that there are resources out there, but we have to go after those resources, but we also have to build up and maximize our little resources we have in terms of land, in terms of skills, etc. How can the diaspora?
There are many ways, David.
Yeah.
Part of the Agricola plan was for each of those young people to have a mentor in the diaspora because they have aspirations. So we needed to have a database of people in the diaspora with their skills so that we can map it to young people who can mentor it. And with Zoom and all these things, that would be a tremendous help. So that's one thing. Motivational, mentoring, etc., guidance, career planning, etc. Secondly, the diaspora should form a development fund. A development fund that would be used for village resuscitation, because we'll do the business plan, we'll do the model, we'll see the profitability, we'll see the NPV. And if that capital was there, that capital could be leveraged with other funds, whether in the budget or through debt, to create a pool of capital to drive a lot of our entrepreneurs who can't do anything because they have the idea and they don't have capital. Third, the diaspora could be a huge market. But again, it comes back to the branding, the positioning, and understanding that. Fourth, the diaspora has to get more involved in bringing the political and the business people together. I formed the African Business Roundtable, but that was comprised of only local businesses, about 12 of them, each of them fighting for survival. The diaspora, there are a lot of people with businesses. We needed an African Business Roundtable or African Business Council with all the people in the diaspora, because then you have such a skill set, such resources, human, intellectual, technological, that the businesses here could have formed joint venture, could grow. So those are three areas right off the bat.
Three areas there right off the bat. Simpson, let me bring you in. Before I bring you, let me acknowledge a couple of people. Valderine, Sister Valderine, my longtime cousin friend. Nice to see you on. Kim Robe from, I think you're from Cayenne. You're tuning in from Cayenne. I know your whole family from Providence. Is your family. You may not know. I think Sherry's on here tonight. But it's good to see you, Auntie Kim, tuning in to the program all the way from Cayenne. And we have, Simpson, a big diaspora in places like Cayenne and Paramaribo. Sometimes you don't pay attention to them. We always look up north and look at
almost 30,000. Yeah.
How many?
Almost 30,000.
There you go. I know you got all the facts. Right. Almost 30,000 people in Cayenne and Paramaribo. It's a big diaspora there. Very important. Sister Kim, welcome. Welcome to Politics 101. Simpson, I know you've been working with IPADG, going into the communities, particularly on agriculture. Tell us about that initiative. What are you seeing? What are you all yielding?
Thank you, David. We have been seeing the same kind of thing that Eric is talking about. A matter of fact, there was a time, all those things that Eric is mentioning, I did go down on the ground personally with Eric in Agricola, in Essequibo, Berbice, and so on. And we have experienced the same thing together. What I would like to say is that through IPADG, when we go down there, and especially now, it is very catastrophic what you find. The destruction, I actually have the pictures of about thousands of farms that were totally destroyed. And the people are willing to rebound. There's some on the east bank of Essequibo that we had funded, east bank of Berbice that we had funded. That is actually a cooperative society with some young people from ages 18 to 30. And they have sheep, goat, pigs, cows, chickens, and catch crop, coconut, planting, banana. But they are interested now in us linking them with good markets. But Eric is right. We have to have this plan, this development plan that caters to all the needs from ground up, so that these different groups that are in all our village, and I was told now that is over 200, some people said 388, but I'm saying if we were to program for 200 villages to start, and we have a contact with them in a hybrid way, in person and virtually. And because of the virtual world now, we can go anywhere. So we can at least try to put things in right perspective. But right now, it is chaotic. It is confusing. The people feel very left out. They're hungry for us to work with them in all kinds of avenues. Currently, the government, in a ad hoc way, is reaching out through various groups to them, but oftentimes is politically motivated. So we have to make sure that the groups as they are currently through organized mechanisms, um, through our organizations. Let us come together. I would challenge Eric, you, David, myself, and all others that effective immediately, if there's one thing that this Republic celebration would do for us, is bring us together to plan, to have this national plan that synchronizes with the government's plan so we can benefit economically, benefit socially, benefit, in other words, get the finance flowing to fund the programs. It's not a lot. And I am convinced that if we are to come together purposefully, we will have this done. I am willing, ready, and able to roll up my sleeves, go into the trenches, deal with the grassroots, deal with whatever level, ordinary level, middle level, executive level, so that we can make a significant difference now. Now is the time. We already wasted a lot of time. We had marvelous opportunity, didn't do it. To me, let us take the bull by the horn now, tie up the foot, tie up everything, and let us together make this thing happen.
Thank you very much, Simpson. And there are lots of suggestions in the
David,
comment
can I say
section.
something?
Yes, go right ahead, Eric.
Do you know that the previous government put $6.2 million in the budget to have 132 community development plans for Amerindian communities? I have the documents because I monitor what's going on. Why isn't that being done for us? Why shouldn't that have been done for us? Conservation International came in, went to the village, told them what they wanted to do, trained them on how the model would work, have them look at what they had in their community, and then they sat down together and developed a community development plan for that group. 132 of those. Conservation International. These are things that our politicians should know when they go to the table. We're not begging, we're asking for equity. And these plans are being developed. Now there's 1.6 billion to further develop that. There's 3 billion for roads. The roads are market to road. So we are sitting in front of the table. Well, not even in front of the table. Our eyes are closed to what is actually happening and what can happen. We could have asked for the same thing in the budget to do 130 villages. And that's organized by the last government and funded through Conservation International. And I can show you all the documents, the training documents and some of the finished products. I mean, if our politicians are going to represent us, they should at least have knowledge. What did they do for local content? Did they insist on affirmative procurement? It's funny, our people are asking for local content to exclude the Trinidadians and the Bajans and everyone else. But within Guyana, there's no local content among the 6 groups. Yeah. It's how you argue. It's how you position things. It's how you frame things. Instead of arguing that, frame it properly, and it becomes easier. I mean, I was taught in a White House Fellowship program, if you define the right problem, the solution falls out in front of you. We're not defining the right problems that we have. We're too busy coursing out.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Brother Eric. There are a couple of things. Let me just thank Sister Brenda, Brother Kenrick for your generous donations for Politics 101. I'm very grateful for it, because we do have bills to pay, and it's very thoughtful of you guys for making your donation. Eric and Simpson, as little boys who grew up in the village, you hear them old people say, "Black man too frightened." and I think that's part of this fear. It's not just a fear of discrimination, but it's a fear of unlocking what is inside of us. Because we've been beaten down for so long that we feel that we don't have much left. But from the government, night. People are saying that there is so much that they have learned on a program like this. We have come to a point where we have slipped in terms of valuing knowledge. And we have to get back to that point where we value knowledge. And a lot of people are asking here about how can we turn this conversation into a form of organization. If those of you in the audience, if you would like for Eric and Simpson in a more intimate surrounding atmosphere, we can organize. We have now the technology via Zoom, in which we can talk about some of these things in a serious way, and for you to see how you can be part of the solution. You know, we have worked out the problems here. You hear the two brothers. They know what the problems are. There are plans that they have, some in the embryonic stages, some of them, as Eric has pointed out, you know, are plans that have been written up and are there. How can you be part of this? All right? If you're interested, just drop me a line, or drop Brother Kedaki a line, right? And say you're interested, and we can organize for these two brothers and for us to have a more intimate discussion on how we can turn what we hear here tonight into organization, into mobilization.
David, let me say something. We're going into electric cars. Why isn't there a group in the diaspora that wants to joint venture with a person in Guyana to have an electric car franchise? That's where we're heading. There's so many simple, practical ideas, that can be worked out. The Exim Bank, if you're an American citizen, whether you're of Guyanese birth or not, there are ways in which they can reduce your risk. There's capital out there if you know how to leverage the system into Guyana.
Yeah.
You could train young people on a Zoom call in your area of expertise.
Lots of possibilities for us. Thank you so much for a wonderful program tonight. My sister Linda from New Jersey. Okay, good night, sister. You're always a trooper, and you're always here with us. You said we are fair because we do not trust each other, and we need to experience these plans happening in our neighborhoods. And that is extremely important. We have to fight at the macro level, but we also have to fight in our communities. So this conversation tonight, let us turn it into something tangible, right? Once you all get in touch with me, whether it's 4 or 5 of you all, we get together and we start to talk how we can mobilize. And you don't have to have just monetary resources. Upside, as we said, is also very important. So resources must not only mean monetary resources, but whatever skills you have at your disposal. And let's try to not just talk, but turn our talk into meaningful action. My brothers, I'll give you all a minute each because I think that we've gone over time, but it's time well spent. A minute each for closing remarks. And then, of course, we will come back in very short order, probably in another week or two, to continue this conversation. Simpson, let's start with
Simpson?
Simpson? Well, Simpson, we're not hearing you, Simpson.
Your mic might be off.
Your mic.
No, I got cut off.
Okay, go ahead. I'm hearing you now.
Okay, good. You hear me?
Yes.
Great. My position is we would achieve something very great by having Eric and his team, me and my team, the diaspora, you and your team, working together, we know that we have a lot of plans that we can go and bring them forward. I agree with Eric. Let us have this national plan. Let us come back very quickly and get some action going. So while we are doing the conversation, let us take action and let us solve some problems. We all have links in the diaspora. We have links in Africa now, in Ghana. I have a direct link with some people. Let us use these opportunities and see what is the best we can have done for the benefit of African Guyanese in our various communities. Let's do it from ground up.
Eric?
Thanks for the program, David. There are massive opportunities in Guyana. We just have to decide if we're going to work together to put together a plan so that we could grow in the same way that other communities are growing. The opportunities aren't about 12 sectors. The diaspora has all the skills and experience. We now need to pool them together to put together something that's viable and something that will create generational wealth. We need to stop complaining about the government. We need to put together a plan and give it to both the government and the opposition and try to figure out which gets funded. But there's a lot of funding already there. It's just that we're not tapping into this. But we need to talk, we need to identify people in the diaspora, and more importantly, we need to have representatives of a village council. Each village should have 1 or 2 people that are part of this dialogue so that they can mobilize their people internally. But the opportunities are there.
Thank you very much, Brother Eric. Thank you very much, Simpson. And let's move this thing. Tonight really was an excellent program.
And by David, we can send you about 10 different plans that are already in place if the diaspora wants to see some of them. I can send them to you, and so they could see what we're talking about.
Wonderful, wonderful. But those of you in the audience who are ready for us to move with this thing, please drop me a line and we will organize and start. So we're having 2 conversations, our public conversation and then our private conversation on how we're going to mobilize. We have to walk on 2 feet at the same time. Good night. I truly love you all. I love human beings, but I love you all who have given birth. I come from the seed of the African. And whether they call me a racist, I don't give a damn. I come from the seed of the African, and I have to nurture that seed so that that seed can produce more African products to ensure that we live in peace, we live in harmony with the rest of the world, but we live in prosperity and equality. Good night. See you all tomorrow night. Thursday night, we're going to be doing a program on Burnham. Don't forget that. And tomorrow night, we're going to have, I think, Kathy Hughes, and so on. But I'll see you all tomorrow night. Bye-bye.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.